new energy.
Thank you very much. I'm super excited to bring this panel together because we've got some leading brands who are going to give us some insights as to what their thinking is around community, values, and trust in Web3. As you know, I'm Catherine Henry. I'm SVP Web3 and Metaverse Innovation Strategy at MediaMonks, and we are responsible for building some of those communities and those activations online, but these are the brands behind it. So I really want to open it up and focus on their stories today. So we're going to start off with Adi Abili, who is head of Metaverse at AB InBev. And I know that AB InBev has so many global brands, and they're very important brands. And so how do you manage to bridge all these different brands with a global reach and import them and bring them into a Web3 scenario? What does that look like for you from a strategic standpoint?
Yeah, no, fantastic question. And you know, AB InBev, we have over 600 brands underneath us, some of the most recognized brands in the world. And we have taken a very intense strategy over this last year about how we enter this Web3 metaverse space. So firstly for us, I think the key thing is that you have to respect the rules and boundaries of Web3 and the metaverse. So we've come in to actually build a video game. And we've done that because it respects Web3. We're building a play-to-own game. We're looking at the community first. We're doing it from a product-led approach instead of from a brand approach. And I think that's the first thing that you have to do. The second thing for us is to really think about familiarity. So, you know, as you said, Catherine, we have so many brands underneath us, and they are all global. So how do you bring them into the story in a way that actually onboards global users, right? We're talking about trying to onboard the next 1 billion people into the Web3 space. So I think that's the second thing when you look at your strategy. And then the last thing I'd say is really about product choice in how you come into this Web3 space. And that is going to be really important for brands. So I talked about, you know, being a product-led approach with AB InBev and us building a game. So when we built this game, we built it as a brandless game. So you don't see AB InBev anywhere on this game. The game is called Crypto Titans, and we started to feed it into the market socially. And we did that, and we had great traction with it. And it's only then, after we started to really embed ourselves into this Web3 community, that we actually then said, this is an AB InBev product, right? We gave this message afterwards. And that was something that was received really well from the community because we had the credibility of just building a game, right? A game that people love, right? Being product first. So I think that's key.
Awesome. Well, that's such a powerful story, and what a great example, especially talking to the authenticity and meeting clients where they are, right? And respecting that this is the new way that they want to communicate with brands. Speaking of large global brands, we're turning now to Pernod Ricard. Kristen Colonna, Vice President Marketing Accelerator at Pernod Ricard. Kristen, I wonder if you can talk to us about the challenges in entering the metaverse authentically, because that's a really big thing when we think about the digital transformation and use of technology being consumer-centric on the one hand, but also at the same time upholding brand values. Can you talk to that?
Sure. Thank you, Catherine, and hello, everyone. And look, I think we've got a lot of learnings on this that it would be a shame if we didn't heed. Those of us that play inside baseball for a living, of course, have a much deeper understanding of the technologies and the experiences that we built and what they're engineered to deliver. And I think if we've learned one thing, we've learned we can't possibly expect the consumer to keep up with the nuance of that, right? It's difficult enough for our industry to keep up with that. And given with the pace of change and technology, that's only going to get more complicated. Their perception is reality to a large degree. So we need to design with them in mind. They're not going to understand the inside baseball. They are going to remember the experience they had. It almost goes back to that old adage, right? Someone won't remember what you say, but they'll remember how it made them feel, right? We've got to be really disciplined about the experiences that we build. You know, at Pernod, we believe that consumer centricity and data are synonyms. Right? Data is the signature of the consumer, and it tells us a wealth of insight about not only what they want, but what they don't. So I think we've got to be explicit and highly disciplined. Technology in service of our brand purpose. How does it help us authentically connect with consumers in a meaningful way? If you can't answer the question, I believe we need to stay out of the room until we can. Some of us may never go into the room, and that is a hard pill to swallow, but it's critical if we want to earn the trust of consumers. I think we need to design with them in mind. Their data is their signature. Mine it to develop highly relevant experiences, right? The AB InBev is a perfect example of that. It's almost altruistic in its design, right? And then consumers don't need to understand the complexity of what's going on in the background because they feel that you are being authentic and of service to them in that way. And then I believe that authentic purpose and that connection follows. And I think that's going to be critical in a Web3 world.
That's really, really insightful, and thank you so much for that. And that segues really nicely to Pamela Snively, who is Chief Data and Trust Officer at TELUS. So TELUS, since data and trust, to Kristen's point, were such an important part of the challenge in Web 2, there's naturally a lot of skepticism around Web 3 and how we're going to enter that, particularly as so many of the devices are able to read so much of our emotions and interpret how we're feeling and what we're actually gazing at and interested in. So in the future of the metaverse, data in the metaverse, how can we eradicate or like bridge that trust with consumers again, or the citizens of the net, as Tony Parisi said earlier?
Well, I love that question, and I really loved what you just said, because I think that's a big portion of how we can start to bridge that trust gap. But I mean, we know trust is absolutely critical. It's foundational to consumers' willingness to even participate in the digital ecosystem, let alone in the metaverse. But to be trustworthy and trusted is going to take something a little different than what we've done in the past. It's going to take us being more transparent. It's going to take true ethical governance processes. It's going to take accountability, demonstrable social benefit, and demonstrable rigor in our processes. So to do that, we need to have purpose-built ethical review processes. And I'm not talking about technology-led development here. That's not their mandate. That is not their imperative. So we need to look at this as something that is cross-functional, interdisciplinary, and that has to get in front of the technology or alongside the technology to build this. So as I say, we need these purpose-built ethical reviews. They have to look at not just privacy, security, but the human impact and the community impact, both beneficial and risky, the scary stuff. And then we have to be very transparent, not about the technology, because we can't drag the whole world along in the technology. It is already too complex, even for the designers themselves. But about the processes. So what are those ethical review processes? And then we have to be transparent about what the findings were. So what are the benefits and what are the risks? And present that along with the technology. And that's how we're going to earn trust. People have to understand that this kind of review is being done behind the scenes.
Thank you. I think this is a really thorough answer. That's really addresses a lot of things very succinctly. And I'm going to stay on that same vein when talking to Quinn Tabor, who's founder and CEO of Immerse. Now, Immerse considers itself a Web3 company, but again, there too, we still hear a lot of talk about disillusionment with Web 2. And even more recently with Web 3, people are feeling that actually now, we've gone through this crypto winter and that's going to affect the entire industry. What is the promise of Web 3 for you, and how will that ensure that we trust companies more than we did before?
Ooh, man, there's like 3 parts. I want to speak for 10 minutes. Hi, folks. My name is Quinn Tabor from Southern California. So many thoughts. I think maybe 10 seconds on Immerse. We are the only non-household name here, obviously. Tech startup, raised $12 million. Spent the first 5 years laser focused on really solving a felt problem for metaverse users. It turned out for us that was language learning. There's folks that wanted to immerse in Spanish or French or German. Like at the time, felt like, that's a great use for the metaverse. And now that we've galvanized this community, how we've defined ourselves, and I know the nomenclature around metaverse and Web3 is still up for debate a little bit. I think one of the ways that we talk about it is the really beautiful undergirding technology that is Web3, blockchain, smart contracts, NFTs, all that stuff that we hear. Yes, those will be ubiquitous, but for us, it's less around us just being the blockchain company or the NFT company. I think when Web3 is, the sign that Web3 is fully here is when all companies are thinking in a Web3 manner, and they're all implementing Web3 technologies in ways that are solving felt needs. So for us, we don't lead with, we're Web3. We actually say, we're VR, and you can also access from your desktop, and you can engage with this amazing social community. I think the one quick example I'll give is, in my talk 2 hours ago, I outlined 4 Web3 concepts that we're really leaning into: privacy, security, opt-in marketing, and ultimately, the DAO as a concept. This will be my last thing. If y'all have heard of that little acronym, Decentralized Autonomous Organization, that's one that we've really latched onto as a way to almost divest ownership ourselves in the decision making and include and empower our users.
Yeah.
One of the ways that we do that is a town hall where we invite our users in and say, hey, here's our product roadmap. Here's our terms of service.
Yeah.
Here's the culture that we're aspiring to as a metaverse community. And interestingly, if you heard my talk, we started bringing on brand sponsors and partners to create these brand experiences in our virtual world. We run it past our DAO, past our community. And if they vote on it, then they're allowed in.
Quinn,
Yeah.
that's fantastic, and that's a really great summary about how we can really harness and galvanize our communities, but also thinking about how to really spotlight their needs and
Yes.
address them
Well said.
with these a huge array of tools. And that brings us actually very nicely, I think, to our next speaker from Niantic, Aaron Schaefer, Vice President of Sales and Operations. Now, Niantic, as you know, is one of the biggest game companies in the world, and I particularly like their spin on the metaverse. And I wanted to ask you specifically, you know a thing or two, obviously, about community, having run Pokemon, which is the world's best loved and best known augmented reality game. How are you harnessing your tech to create and foster a community in the metaverse, and how do you define that?
Well, I guess we should start by acknowledging there's probably going to be many metaverses. The flavor that we're most interested in at Niantic is what we have referred to as the real world metaverse. So we are trying to use bits and fuse them with atoms to get people more excited about going out into the real world, exploring with each other. So that is how we are trying to use the metaverse to make the real world more exciting, more fun than it is today. So just a layer on that real world to make it more tantalizing. We hope that we've done a pretty good job proving that that thesis is true with Pokemon Go, which remains, thank you for saying so, Catherine, one of the top mobile games in the world. We've got 50 million plus people playing every month these games where the maps of the real world have been turned into a game board and they get to go out and play with their friends. And they create a new sense of community, friends that they know, but also people in their local communities who are just passionate fellow game players. So our first 5 years in existence, we've been really focused on building great games that leverage the real world. We've now taken all of the tools that we gave to our developers and put them into a platform that other developers can use. So we're really excited to see what other developers outside of those within Niantic's walls will go build when we hand all these tools over to them. I think what's unique to us and what we think is most interesting is this map, using this 3D map of the world that would enable people to build sort of experiences that are persistent and really tethered to place. And we hope that will inspire all sorts of new communities and get people out back into local and new communities they're visiting when you fuse those bits with the real world atoms.
I love the concept around fusing the real world with the metaverse and the new devices, because we tend to default to thinking that it's always an online experience, whereas this really validates the proposition that you want to have real life or real world anchors that people can visit, and then it gives value to creating this physical digital interface or interaction. And I think that's a really exciting thing, especially for concerned parents, thinking that this is going to really put people behind headsets and that they'll disappear into alternate realities. So I want to go back to the brands generally, and I'm going to open this up to anybody who wants to address it, talking about ROI in the metaverse, because obviously, we've been driving on Web 2, and the marketers traditionally have been looking for data. We want to know everything about you. How is that going to change in a Web3 scenario? And are you willing to cede some of that data? And what does ROI mean in a Web3 scenario?
Wow.
Anyone?
I'll take a first step, which is just, we, because we're focused on the real world, brands are ever present in the real world, and we want them to be ever present in our games and experiences. It would be strange to go walk down the street and not see many, many brands. We think the challenge that we give to ourselves is we've got to make sure that we make being a part of our AR experiences worthwhile to brands. Are we helping drive brand awareness, brand intent? And ultimately, are we driving ROI? Are we able to actually, for real storefronts, drive people into those stores as part of our game? So yes, the context has changed. It's AR, but the actual results we hope for brands are going to be the tried and true ones, which is, are we actually driving ROI for the brands that partner with us?
How do you define ROI?
We leave it up to the brand whether they're trying to drive top of the funnel results and improve brand awareness, or are they trying to actually drive sales in store. We've got different levers that we can pull to help drive at the various parts of the funnel, but we really leave it up to the brand to determine where they want to play. We think we've got better solutions in some places than others, but it's really up to them about what results they're trying to drive with any given campaign or engagement in our games with our players.
Would you say that iteration is part of that process? Or?
Absolutely.
Okay. Adi.
Yeah, I mean, I think you summed it up perfectly, where it really depends on the brands and the company as to what ROI really means to them. I think we're in a really tricky situation at the moment where the space is just changing so much, every single day. These models that we think about in terms of revenue, do they hold, right? And I look at the example of, even Magic Eden, right? And this is a conversation that has, plagued Twitter for the last 2 weeks, right? Their business model that they had around royalties, that is something that we thought was cemented in Web3, right? And in a second, that has been completely upturned into how we really distribute royalties to creators, to people who actually make things in the Web3 space. And you think that that's a fundamental of what Web3 actually is, and that business model will stick. And it hasn't, right? And that's something that the market has said, right? That's what the data is telling us, that the market doesn't want to pay, right? So I think to that point, it's really difficult for a brand at the moment to dictate what ROI is. If I think about AB InBev, for us, particularly with this product that we've done, we almost took that out of the equation, right? We took revenue out of the equation. And we thought more about how do we actually onboard new customers. So it's not even about trying to convert our old customers, to enjoy AB InBev even more or drink more beer. It's about how do you connect to this new audience, this new Web3 native consumer. And I think that's actually what most Web2 companies should be looking at in terms of ROI. Because I believe, and I'm pretty sure if we talked about all our numbers here, market share would be falling for quite a few Web2 companies right now.
Kristen, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I'll just build on that. I think that having a conversation on ROI that is exclusive to something like the metaverse in a vacuum is doing your marketing and your business ambitions a disservice. Like any manner in which we invest with an advisor, you should be looking at your marketing mix in the same way. At Pernod, we are very much a test and learn culture. We actively sweat other parts of our marketing strategy that we know we can mine for return to free up money to go innovate with little to no risk, and frankly, little to no short-term expectation other than we're going to get smarter about how to be more relevant to consumers whose preferences and profiles are changing. And that's a very systematic, we essentially call it Moneyball marketing. And that is our approach to how we manage our entire marketing portfolio. I think that we've got quite a learning curve ahead of us, right? And to sit on the sidelines of that learning curve because you can't justify a short-term ROI or conversion is a complete disservice to not only your ability to learn and grow with a consumer, but frankly, your capability to future-proof your business. So I encourage a portfolio view. Sweat the assets that work for you, find ways to make them more effective, find ways to make them more efficient. But to your point, hate to take such an ethereal topic like the metaverse and bring us back down to some marketing fundamentals, but in the CPG business, if we don't bring new consumers and new households into the fold, we don't exist anymore. So we look at this as a wonderful opportunity to help our brands become more discovered and more engaged with in a world, especially alc bev, where the category is hyper fragmented and hyper competitive. And it just becomes a new palette on which to paint and engage consumers with our brands when they're always looking for something new to discover.
Thank you so much. I think that's a really important point in terms of like really continuing to engage people dynamically and to continue to also test different modalities and to reach our brands while this is still in its relatively protein state. Turning on that point to data and security, I wonder too how with Web3 and blockchain we're going to be able to engage them dynamically, but at the same time also ensure privacy and that they own their assets and they own their activities.
Yeah, well, there's a huge problem. I could spend all day on that and still not get the answer right, but I think we have opportunities. I mean, first of all this incredible brain power going into designing the metaverse, if just a portion of that went into designing privacy-enhancing technologies, we wouldn't have to have this discussion. But I also think that it presents opportunities because this is, we've been in this space where mining every detail about an individual has been the only way to get, to improve our marketing and our ad share. Whereas once we are in the metaverse and we're talking about, creating new kind of real life or alternate life realities, there's a whole world out there that we can actually market without necessarily knowing individual information about about the person. So they're in that world. We know what they're doing in that world. It doesn't have to be tied to them as an individual. They can be presented with the marketing within that world, and that is something that we've never been able to do in the real world, and it doesn't require any personal information about them. Pulling it out of that world and into the real world, that's a whole different thing. So that's where the trust piece comes in, and that's where we have to be really careful. But again, there are opportunities there for privacy-enhancing technologies, really good de-identification. Even synthetic data can serve us greatly in this piece. But it's only when we pull that data out and it follows you outside of that metaverse that we have a real problem from a privacy perspective.
Can I riff on that?
Please do.
Oh, I love that. Exactly what you just shared. I think within our user base, I wish we could say we had millions, but the thousands, already that sentiment of, ooh, Immerse isn't mining my data. They aren't selling it to third parties. For one, that alone is a form of ROI for our brand partners.
Yeah.
Two, yes, we are no longer harvesting their personal data, what cat video they liked, or what Facebook page or sports team, but instead, I think the underutilized piece that I get really excited by is within our metaverse, we are collecting the most incredible and sophisticated data on each user's interaction with each brand location. So we're able to optimize, if it's, I keep picking on one of our guest brands that's in the metaverse, the Westin. We're able to now optimize every small portion of that virtual brand experience because we have data on where they're looking, how they're interacting with that good, how much time they're spending in this portion of the room, who they're talking to, how. That level of data, dare I say, will actually allow us to even more so optimize long-term our brand experiences than if we know, oh, they like that cat video, or they followed this group on Facebook.
Right. But how secure is that data then? I mean, do they own their own data? Or
I think that's the necessity. I think from our user base, I won't speak for everyone, we would be doing our users a gross disservice if we in any way allowed that to leave our ecosystem. My long-term goal is that it will always be encrypted on the blockchain belonging to our users.
I want to turn that over to Niantic and hear your thoughts on that.
I was just going to add, there's of course the data piece and the privacy piece. I think the other thing to think about is we learned a lot, hopefully we've learned a lot in Web 2 about policies, especially about how users should interact with each other, where the lines should be drawn around user-generated content. Before my time at Niantic, I was at YouTube and Google, and for a short while I got to be in the crucible that was trust and safety at YouTube. And I think the learning there is that we can't be altruistic about what people are going to do with this technology. We need to think about what are the ways that people might misuse this technology as well, and really get ahead of that with setting the right policies about how people engage, and sort of doing proactive red teaming of playing devil's advocate, what's the worst way that this technology could be used? I think that's unfortunately something that the Web 2 companies, again, not because of bad intent, but good intent and hope that these technologies would be only used in great ways, would say, I know they would say, we wish we had done that. We didn't do it, and we're playing catch up. And I think we have the opportunity as we build this new world, whether you call it metaverse, whether you call it Web3, whether it's spatial computing or not, it's a whole new way of interacting with technology. And I think being really proactive about thinking through the potential issues and trying to get ahead of them is something we can do right, or better at least. We might not get it right because it's an iterative process, but we can at least do it better this time.
I love that. I think that really putting your own regulatory framework around and anticipating that, especially when you've got
Yes.
users, especially in your case, who can even be quite young. And so you
Yes.
want to make sure that as they venture out in the world and are navigating the real world according to your map, that they
Yep.
are doing so
safe.
safely. I think that's really smart, and it's a responsible approach. Adi?
Yeah, just wanted to actually just come off some of those things that you were saying there, and I think it's quite lazy to rely on data in the way that we do, to be honest. I think it's like so uncreative, when I think about it. We're talking about data in this context, and I just think, just go and ask them. We don't need to be overcomplicating this, and maybe I'm too simplistic, with technology, but it's, I do 2 or 3 Twitter spaces a day, and I just ask people what they want.
Can we
right?
just drop the mics now? I mean, that was
And
great.
they just say it, right? And I think that our reliance on data in the way that we have is actually what needs to change.
Yeah.
Not so much the processes or the way that we put tech into it. Just don't be lazy. There's other ways to make money.
Adi, you've expressed that so beautifully. I think that everybody can agree that it's really a time for creativity, not just for user creativity, but also marketing creativity, that we are responsible for thinking more laterally and thinking about this as a new opportunity for us to leverage this technology to engage our communities much more actively. And to your point, they are there, and they're happy to share with us their insights, their opinions, and to help us improve our products and our experiences in many ways. And so I think that these spaces, if we use them creatively, and that's something that we advise on every day, depending on the type of client, is not to be literal in these spaces, but to really unleash the imagination. And then you'll find that the dwell time is longer, the loyalty is higher. They want to collect your assets. And so it really changed the conversation quite dramatically. Well, I'm going to pull Martin Sorrell right now, Sir Martin Sorrell, and say, what keeps you up at night? Anyone want to volunteer? What their concerns are, Web3 or Metaverse? Or user generation UGC content in terms of like the ownership
Give a
of
lighter
assets.
one than UGC content because that keeps me up at night and has for years, and I don't want it to anymore. But for us at Niantic, because we're so excited about the real world metaverse, today we rely on people using their phones to navigate the real world, and of course we think it'll be a much better experience when there is some wonderful, simple, not creepy, not heavy, head-mounted display device that we can all use. And so certainly the current, and we are not building our own, we are working with partners to do reference design and things like that, but we're not hardware makers. But the current economic environment is causing a lot of the biggest innovators in the world to need to pull back on some of their R&D in this area. So one thing that keeps me up at night is just, are we further away from a great glasses design that for us in the real world metaverse is going to make it so much easier to navigate. We hope we're not, but that is one thing that keeps me up at night.
Well, I would say, I wrote something once, and I really just love the title so much I had to just use it. But it's called "The Future is Fast and Slow," and I feel like the technology, we're really at the dawn, and it's worth remembering that even though many of us have been steeped in this space for a number of years, for the general public, it's still really early. And even when it comes to hardware and even the infrastructure, and now with Web3 technologies and platforms, these all are going to emerge. And so this is a process and a journey that we're taking together, and it's super exciting to see how each one of you is bringing your expertise to bear in your respective companies to translate these into effective actions and business models and evolving this together with community. So I'd like to thank you each for sharing your insights and for joining us on the stage today. And thank you all for participating. Thank you for joining us.